William Afton, the one character who shaped the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise into what it is now. Arguably the main character, certainly the one we know the most about. Initially known as the Purple Guy or Purple Man, he started out as an unknown figure behind the many deaths at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, and the direct cause of the possessed animatronics. Many of which are his victims, some his creations, and almost all of them have been directly affected by him in some way. This Purple Man was eventually given a name, William Afton, along with a voice, a face, and much more, turning him from a dark shadow in the corner of Freddy's into something else. And that something else is about a half dozen rabbits. Yes, Afton has gone through a lot of changes over the years, and I regret to say many of the more recent ones haven't been for his benefit. Indeed, the current Afton is a far cry from the one we were first introduced to. Today we are going to be looking at the full story of William Afton. How he was crafted as a faceless murderer, became a supervillain, a technician fusing together souls and machines for his own evil devices, and then became quite an embarrassment. This is a remake of a video I made months ago with a text-to-speech AI, though don't expect that to be the only change in this video. This time we're going to be covering everything in the games. We will measure this rabbit for its worth and see if he is the glue binding all the events of Fnaf together, or the cinder block weighing them down. Purple Man's first appearance was in Fnaf 2, while he is implied to exist in Fnaf 1, due to the newspaper articles depicting the missing children incident. It is not until the second game that we see his face in person. To discuss the incident in question, the Purple Man put on a suit and lured a group of children into the back room where he murdered them. Though, these are only some of his victims. In Fnaf 2, we are introduced to two minigames, Take Cake to the Children and Go Go Foxy. In Take Cake, the Purple Man pulls up outside Freddy's in his car where a child is crying outside. He walks up to the child, does something, and then the child turns gray as he leaves, the implication being that the Purple Man murdered this child. There is nothing you can do to stop him, even as a voice spells out, "Save him." You are just an observer watching something that already happened. Likewise, Go Go Foxy shows Foxy running into a party room to greet children. On the third go, we see the Purple Man smiling outside Foxy's curtain, and we find 5 great bodies waiting in the party room. It's not confirmed whether these are the same missing children or another group, but that would still mean that at minimum he currently had 6 victims, and at most 11. These events alone would be enough to classify the Purple Man as a serial killer, and unfortunately, this isn't where it stopped. The animatronics do attempt to stop him. In one minigame, the Follow Me minigame, the puppet guides Freddy in an attempt to perhaps stop the Purple Man. To no avail, as he rushes Freddy and somehow takes him out. So far, this gives out the vaguest of characterizations, that he may know how to subdue the animatronics, and that he takes significant joy out of what he does, carrying a beaming smile as he watches Foxy go see what he has done. It's not until Fnaf 3 that we finally see the Purple Man in person, or what's left of him. Many games show a series of events in which he disassembled each member of Freddy's band, luring them off before taking them apart one by one. Unfortunately, this freed the souls trapped inside of the animatronics, and they cornered him in his supposed safe room, no longer held back by the same restraints as their robotic bodies. Panicking, the Purple Man hobbled around a bit before running to a slumped suit in the corner. He yanked it on quickly, laughing at his success, and then proceeded to be skewered alive by said suit, a suit that he mistakenly believed would protect him. To very quickly cover this suit, this is Spring Bonnie. So, as introduced in Fnaf 3, Freddy's used a variety of Springlock-based suits. Springlock suits were able to be both used as a typical animatronic and worn as a costume, with assistance from the built-in Springlock mechanism. These things were extremely dangerous. You couldn't get them wet, you couldn't move too quickly, because the chances of you surviving when all this metal reformed into place was extremely rare, but not impossible as suggested by the books. But like I said, we do still see the Purple Man, or the undead remains of him, fused with the suit he died in. Him now facing the consequences of his actions by becoming the embodiment of the torment he inflicted upon others. His name is Springtrap. Springtrap is a much more foul creature to any animatronic before him. Rotten to the core, literally, and having not even the faintest glint of a child-friendly persona to hide behind. Flesh pools around his feet, large holes are open in his suit, like gaping wounds, and a once golden exterior is now toxic green. He stalks around the halls of a horror attraction built as an homage to the history of Freddy's, following the false sounds of children's laughter and searching for a way out, and for the one keeping him captive here. He stood out from the animatronics before him. Few of them did we see actively moving outside of the jump scares, but we did see Springtrap move, and when he didn't move like an animatronic. He moved like a human in a suit. He would stalk down halls, past the windows, and hide around corners, peeking in before making his move. Springtrap did so silently, though you could occasionally hear moans and groans in the ambiance, the sounds of him laboring in his wearable prison. There was a time when fans analyzed the audio of his moaning and believed they could hear the words, "Help me." I'm not sure if that was on purpose or just hearing what they believed they heard, but it is rather unsettling. Almost as unsettling as the secret screens where you can see Springtrap yanking back his jaws and trying to free himself from the suit, to no avail. All that was left behind being his heavily decayed corpse. There was quite a bit about Springtrap that turned out well, and that's despite the fact that his appearance was such a tall order to fill. This was putting a face on a character who fans had already been putting faces and fan interpretations on for a while. And even though he didn't match the popular examples, the response was overwhelmingly positive. Fnaf 3 itself was sort of mixed, leaning on the positive side at release, but Springtrap himself was given a thumbs up. This is the peak of William Afton, and he hasn't even gotten his name yet. William Afton's name was actually revealed in the books, but I will be tackling those on a separate video, so instead, let's take a look at Sister Location. Well, first, actually, let's take a look at Fnaf World, then we can move on to Sister Location. The Purple Guy appears in two places in Fnaf World. Firstly, as the Purple Guy character in the Halloween update. Except, as revealed by the character themselves, they aren't really the real Purple Man. They're just an innocent sprite. Though that being said, he still has an attack called Slasher, which has a 1 in 10 chance of doing a huge amount of damage. Enough damage to knock out most basic enemies. That's rather suspicious, buddy. Then there's Purplegeist, a ghostly purple and skeletal form primed as the final boss, first introduced in a Halloween teaser and then brought back for the Halloween update, only to have the rainbow drop in and smush him. Rest in pieces, Purplegeist. Alright, now let's get into Sister Location. Sister Location is where Afton got his name revealed in-game, for the most part, where he was suddenly upgraded from serial killer to a tech wizard building animatronics to kidnap and kill children stealthily at parties, where we were introduced to his children, Elizabeth and Michael, and where he was given a stereotypically evil British accent. So we don't know much about William from the initial games, but you can sort of feel a jerk in his character importance here. It's almost like Afton switched genres, from Texas Chainsaw Massacre to RoboCop. Not to mention that after the story seemingly finished up with Afton and Fnaf 3, a story that dealt with vague hints and mystery, it suddenly became very forthright on information when it involved William himself. Something I wouldn't bring up if not for what came later. However, William wasn't in Sister Location. It was Michael, his son, filling his role. Save for a quick cutscene at the end of the custom night mode, where we can see Springtrap escaping Fazbear frights, something that was already teased in FNAF 3's newspaper, but was finally confirmed here. There is another appearance I forgot to mention, and that's in FNAF 4. There's a brief clip where we can see the purple guy helping someone else suit up, but it's so small, it's not really important. William's actual next role was in Pizzeria Simulator, where he appeared in a brand new design. So we're gonna ignore the fact that this is technically supposed to be Springtrap further decayed, even though that's impossible, and instead deal with the rabbit in front of us. Scraptrap is a bit of a mess. In my last video I went really hard on this guy, but since then my thoughts have sort of softened. Though that doesn't change the fact that, by all accounts, he is a major downgrade from his last appearance. He no longer looks like a Springlock suit, at least not a believable one, being much more skinny. His lumpy face is supposed to look more skeletal, but instead looks a little goofy. Speaking of skeletons, he is now sporting a significant amount of bones that the last version of him did not have. A skull in the head, finger bones, bone at the end of his broken arm. This edition seems like it would have been more realistic, but I feel something about it kind of clashes with the design. Scraptrap is basically what happens when you try to make Springtrap scarier but don't understand what it is that makes Springtrap scary. So you deform his face and add a bunch of bones, but then you take out his bulk and his face isn't really helping matters. And since there are no cameras and no animations beyond the jump scares, that unique movement factor Springtrap had was also lost, something that played greatly into making him stand out. Without it, this is the scariest Scraptrap gets. But in my opinion, and I'm pretty sure I'm the only person with this opinion, the worst part about Scraptrap is his dialogue. Yes, unlike Springtrap, Scraptrap talks, something that, on its own, I wouldn't have a problem with. Except the dialogue isn't great. The problem with Scraptrap's dialogue is it sounds like he's trying his hardest to be edgy, with a lot of extra words spilling out in some rather pitiable threats.
Fascinating what they have become. Bittersweet, but fitting. I always come back. That was easier than I thought it would be. What a deceptive calling. I knew it was a lie the moment I heard it, obviously. But it is intriguing nonetheless.
This is also the first example of a trend that you will start to notice going on, and that's Afton's habit of retroactively claiming credit for the stupid things that happened to him. In Fnaf 3, we were introduced to a brief glimpse of Afton's ego, and it's sort of the one clear thing that carried after that game into Sister Location. He laughs at the ghost children while sitting in his metal death trap, not thinking for a second that it could ever go off, but it does. Now, ages later, Afton, in the form of this thing, is playing up his own self-importance as some great threat, some true mastermind genius, as he's sitting in an oven in a rabbit suit missing an arm. This also begins his habit of, I know better than to do something stupid, but I'm going to do that stupid thing anyway. This is beyond Pride Before the Fall. This is quite literally pure delusion. Something that would have been an interesting case study, if not for what comes later. But I cannot stress enough, Scraptrap sounds like a product of the 2000s. Every one of his lines is eye-rollingly bad, and there's no indication that it was on purpose. Yet he sits quietly in the corner, twiddling his thumbs as Baby briefly goes off on a tirade, and then, hey, it's that guy from the tapes, comes in and tells us the story of Fnaf. Afton is actually quite polite, letting them all take their turn and then dying in a fire. But I suppose that was all part of his plan. This was also the game that confirmed major plot events in the book actually happened in the game as well. It confirmed that William and this unknown man burning them used to work together at least. It cemented his connection to everyone in that pizzeria before they all burned together. But this was the end, right? This was supposed to be the big finale to the old games. William, Michael, Ennard, the characters from the books, everyone was dying in that fire. We see a picture of the children's graves, suggesting the finality of this moment. This is the end of the story. But it wasn't the end for Afton. Ultimate Custom Night is a funny case because we receive hints that we might be playing as William in that game, but we also receive a few hints that we are playing as someone else, likely Michael. I won't get too far into it. What I will get into is that the player can activate a secret to meet Old Man Consequences, a character in FNAF World who reappears in this game. He tells us to leave the demon to his demons, meaning Afton. If you turn up the distorted noises in the background, you can hear William screaming. So here's the catch. We activate the secret and we get in here and we control this character, and that character isn't Afton. William is screaming non-stop wherever he is, so it doesn't sound like he's being jump scared, but being subjected to something much worse. So wouldn't that imply that we're not Afton? Why does the puppet say, "I don't hate you, but stay out of my way"? What does that line imply? He would hate Afton, and he's his target, so what? He's the aware one. Did he just suddenly switch sides? And what does this line mean? Seeing you powerless is like music to me? That's not comparable. You can't see music. Not your screams sound like music to me. By the way, bud, I don't hate you. I just want you to move. But I digress. Springtrap and Scraptrap both appear in this game. Springtrap is still voiceless, and Scraptrap recycles a line from Pizzeria Simulator. Springtrap and Scraptrap have completely different mechanics. While Springtrap is one of the vent animatronics that must be stopped and deterred from coming out the vent, Scraptrap is a one-and-done animatronic. Basically, when you see the right cue, you must shut the right door before he comes in and jump scares you. Let's get Fnaf AR out of the way really quickly. Springtrap is one of the animatronics released at launch, and he is by far the most difficult animatronic to handle. Even with the addition of animatronics requiring masks and multiple steps, I'd say the only one harder than Springtrap is Golden Freddy, and that's because Golden Freddy actually has a Springtrap phase. So how unfortunate is it that Springtrap gets some of the most skins of any animatronic? Ouch. Springtrap's lines bounce from alright to the same try-hard energy of Pizzeria Simulator. Here's a few examples.
Hide if you want. It did not save the others. It will not save you. Suffer now, like all who have stood before me. I can taste the fear in your breath.
One of Springtrap's skins, Clowntrap, also appeared in Security Breach Fury's Rage, a spin-off game, as a basic enemy. Now with all that out of the way, let's move on to the true successor of Pizzeria Simulator and Ultimate Custom Night, Help Wanted. Afton is reborn in a new form. No, I am not kidding. He hopped out of hell real fast. So in Help Wanted, a game developer is making a game at the request of Fazbear Entertainment. They received some animatronic hardware to use to help make the game, somehow, and end up picking up a nasty virus hidden inside. This anomaly is obviously Afton. It's a man in a rabbit suit. And before you say it's just a virus replicating William, if it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, looks like a duck, it's probably not a goose. Even if it isn't actually William, it is filling the exact same role, same motivation, same personality. Though now working under the name Glitchtrap. Though, don't let the name fool you, he is significantly more threatening than Scraptrap before him, largely in what he's capable of. Basically, Afton is now a ghostly virus that can infect both people and machines, and video games, files, pretty much anything that he comes in contact with long enough. He's driven some of his vessels insane too, in the case of beta tester Jeremy, who he, for some reason, forced to cut his own face off. There's no obvious benefit in doing this. Glitchtrap might have just done it because he wanted to. While I find the concept of Glitchtrap rather convoluted and have been pretty burned out on rabbits, get it, I do feel like there was some things about Glitchtrap that were a positive, such as with him being silent again. A lot of Glitchtrap's creepy characteristics come through pantomiming. They're uncomfortably human-like, even more so than Springtrap, and the addition of that silence in this context, and him always being there watching, getting closer the further you get into the game, paint a rather unsettling picture, especially after the tape makes it clear that he will do harm. Though technically Glitchtrap does have one unique line. It can be heard by editing the audio at the end of the Princess Quest minigame. This is the only William Afton line that ever unsettled me, and I think it's because of how it sounds. No doubt this Glitchtrap is just William, but it doesn't sound like him. It sounds like his voice, but in tone it carries none of that edge to it. It is flat and direct. It really is like something else replicating his voice. It reminds me of the ghostly voices in the game Silvio, a game about listening to the static and decoding the spirits calling back through. Very creepy. Nice. Springtrap does reappear as well, as Fnaf 3 is remade, and it's interesting to see his zombie-like but still more human than the other animatronics movement in real time. But Glitchtrap is the big draw here, and not just him, but his new unwilling accomplice, the reluctant follower, Vanny, a young woman possessed and threatened into wearing the bunny mask. Leading into the next game, teased at the end of Help Wanted with an ominous sight of a massive unfinished construction site. But you know what? While I was sort of skeptical, this Afton return setup didn't seem too bad. Sure, I would have preferred to not have Afton return again this quickly, but his new form was dangerous in a way different from those before it, and Vanny was proposed as the next big step in the Fnaf series. So things looked bright. Wait a minute. Why do I hear boss music? Wait, what is that? Is that... Oh god. Scott! Or Steel Wool. Probably both. So, forget the setup with Glitchtrap and Vanny. It's still sort of there, but Afton's gone back to his roots. And by his roots, I mean this piece of overcooked jerky uprooted itself from a shallow grave and became the next trap in the line of rabbits, suddenly overtaking as the last boss with absolutely no fanfare. What's the point of that? This is just so bizarre to me. I mean, he looks better than Scraptrap, but the reception wasn't any better. Though that had little to do with his hyper-realistic design, now with a full set of dentures, and more just to do with his shuffling, disheveled look. People started referring to him as Peepaw Afton, making this the first Afton version that is known more as a meme than a villain. Though the problem with Burntrap absolutely is how he is just shoehorned in at the last act. There is no build-up. He just rises from his battery-operated coffin like bloody Dracula, and there's a brief boss fight, and then engorged inner drags him off somewhere. We know Afton's coming back, but the threat here is less ancient evil rising from the depths and more the in-laws are planning to visit next week. Plus, what it did to the Pizzeria Simulator ending. Look, I've been critical of the ending to Pizzeria Simulator. There's a few things in it that have never really felt satisfying to me, but I know there's a lot of people who deemed it the perfect ending to that section of FNAF's story. And I know some people who felt like the ultimate retcon of that ending was a slap in the face, especially when more and more of the characters seem to be creeping back up from the fire that never was. I agree that this game's needless retroactive tweaking of the ending is a mistake, and does negatively affect the end of this game as well, largely because Burntrap's appearance is ultimately pointless when the last game introduced him as a completely different entity. The anniversary picture seems to imply that these are technically 3 separate characters, the main characters, even though 2 of them barely have any screen time, and 2 of them are technically the same person. There's something worth unpacking there, but I don't feel like it right now. There's some lines in the trailer that seem to be in Burntrap's voice, but it's unconfirmed and they weren't used in the game, so here's one of them.
When I first found you, you were nothing. You were small, pathetic. But now, you are more. Are you ready?
So Burntrap's design is confusing. From the location, literally the Pizzeria Simulator Pizzeria under the Pizzaplex, you would assume that he is a further decline of the Spring Scrap line, maybe with some modifications, though instead a majority of his body is just a glamrock endoskeleton, and the other parts, i.e. the head, don't really resemble the one that came before it. He looks exceptionally greasy. Also, the trailer shows Afton's introduction by crawling across the floor, and his arm is a little different. So yeah, there were big time constraint changes here too. There's a belief that the missing and teased Glamrock Bonnie was used to rebuild Afton, but that's unconfirmed. In fact, that's so unconfirmed that the last place Bonnie was seen was Monty Golf, and Monty has a minigame secret that shows Freddy in a dumpster and him as the star, portraying his desire to get ahead, and with the knowledge that Monty eventually replaced Bonnie. Counterintuitive if the implication was to have Bonnie be the source of Afton's new body. There's nothing to explain Burntrap coming back. Glitchtrap had a well-detailed explanation of his arrival, but Burntrap? There's not even a hint before his reveal. The closest thing to it is a few hints of something draining power, and that could have easily been tacked onto the blob. There's also the sinkholes in Roxy Raceway, but again, that could have just been a pit dedicated to the blob. In fact, there's no mention of Afton at all in the game. Not what he did, not his name, nothing. And that's a problem when this is the first AAA game given to an audience. Because there's a lot of people whose introduction to Fnaf was Security Breach, and they're gonna have no idea who he is. So that surprise reveal, dead on arrival. Not to mention the issue with Vanny. So we get pre-release material, source code hints, and hidden things that portray these two working together. But nothing in-game. There's no dialogue between him and Vanny. Vanny never mentions him, he never mentions Vanny. The two are in separate locations. How did a recharge station get down here? 3, in fact. Did Vanny bring them here? Like I said earlier, this matters because you cannot have a payoff without a build-up, and there's none here. There's just a barely functional boss fight. Even though it's not as buggy as Release, it's still like steering a grocery cart around the Superstar Daycare's play area. It's sluggish, hard to steer, and once you're done, you question your life's choices. Long story short, Vanny and Burntrap blew it. I would say, just taking in all the extra stuff surrounding it, that Burntrap is the weakest iteration of Afton. He fell the hardest after the somewhat resurgence of Glitchtrap, technically throwing away what they had set up just to take him back a few steps, and then doing nothing but burning him again. Now, separately, these many forms of Afton don't seem to matter, but when lined up together and with the knowledge that Afton is both the main antagonist and practically the main character, you can see where this might all affect the franchise. Every bunny is a completely different character. They're the same character, but they are distinct in some way. Yet they all have to be Afton, so in the end, they're all tethered to this same cycle. And it is looking back that we realize the problem. The problem of Afton's constant upgrades and repeated inclusions, even when it means him going against himself to stunt his own progress. I think it involves the amount of popularity the character had back in the first few games. I cannot stress how popular the purple guy was in those early years of Fnaf. He still technically is. And in response, Fnaf veered hard. William couldn't just be a murderer, no, he had to be a mad scientist. He had to be Jason Voorhees and Freddy from Nightmare on Elm Street. He had to be the ultimate evil, with every new version of him being an attempt to outdo the old one. A serial killer, then a mad scientist, then a virus, a new godlike being with infinite power who cannot be destroyed. More and more of the lore hints were about him. More of the stories were about him. Every character was in some way related to him. He was the alpha and the omega and all in between. But there was one thing William couldn't ever achieve after that first iteration. That mystery, that scare factor, that curiosity for this unknown figure. We now know William front, back, and center, and it doesn't matter how many times the series assures us that he is the smartest, most evil thing in the world. We've seen too much. We know too much. We've been oversaturated. Ironically, like the oversaturation that Five Nights at Freddy's was facing around the time this big change went into effect. The more we saw of William's personality, the more it turned into a goofy caricature. The fact that he kept getting burned and reappearing became a punchline, and his possible replacements are either directly controlled by him, or just him in a slightly new identity. And even they are dethroned so that Afton can take the last hurrah, even when his appearance has no rhyme or reason to it. His newest iteration was totally uninspired. Only there as though depicted by a corporate mandate. The realistic portrayal of a murderer, something that is timelessly scary, was tossed aside in order to make him a cartoon villain. Because Afton was never good enough. And here's where I get into the section about the implications of Afton's ego. I'll brush over this quickly, but Afton's egotism is constantly validated by the story. Because as pathetic as Afton repeatedly is, he's constantly given an inexplicable boost to a higher position of power, to the point where now he really is truly like a god. Look, there's only one man who can keep coming back as the ultimate evil and constantly be reborn and still be cool. And William Afton is no Ganondorf. I think it's time that either Afton was put out to pasture or the series figured out what they really wanted to do with him and just stuck to it. Changing forms all the time isn't helping, especially when some of those forms can do better than others. Also, we already know everything we have to about Afton. You can stop hinting at his family. Technically, all of them are dead. One of them got sidelined so hard that he never even got an official name. And now it's like 50 or so years out from them. We get it, but also you're wasting valuable Wabbit waifu time. Again, I don't think it would have been impossible to bring Afton back. Maybe just once and have it work. but I don't think hinging the entire franchise on one character was a good idea. If anything, it strangled the character, and it held back the story of Fnaf for way too long. If you want to move on to the next step, then commit to it. As long as it's not just Afton with another name or a slightly different body. You will be cut loose and able to try something new, and maybe people will be intrigued by that change just as much as they were with the first reveal of the Purple Man and Springtrap. You won't know until you try, and it's worth the effort. If it doesn't work out, you can always bring Afton back at a later date. He's not going anywhere. Also, here's a question. If Glitchtrap is the unintended virus that got into the system and not only invaded the games but infected the Pizzaplex, as suggested by the numerous email messages and therapist messages talking about the corruption, attacks, and attempt to stop the virus overtaking the system, then why does he have his own arcade cabinet?